Begin by introducing the panelists. We're excited to have Javier Trujillo, Olivia Sideman, and Peter Estes. So Olivia is an Associate Deputy Public Defender with Alameda County, where she has worked since 2017. As a public defender, Olivia represents indigent clients who are unable to pay for a lawyer, and they're mostly from urban and suburban communities in the Oakland area. Peter is the Community Resource Program Director for Senior and Disability Action, an organization that educates seniors and people with disabilities to fight for individual rights and social justice. The San Francisco-based organization works through individual support and collective action to create a city and world in which seniors and people with disabilities can live well and safely. Javier is the Chief Assistant Director for Marin County Department of Internet Solutions and Technology, and he's a board member of the Marin County Board of Supervisors Digital Marin Action Plan. What led us to Javier initially was his work with the nonprofit organization Canal Alliance, who partnered with the city of San Rafael, which is located just north of San Francisco, to build a mesh network serving San Rafael's historically underserved Canal neighborhood.
Thanks, Shalev, for introducing the panelists, and thank you, NCC, for having us, and thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to ask the first question is going to be for Olivia. Panelists, if we could keep these first questions, this first round of answers, under 5 minutes. We have a lot of fantastic material to get through, and we want to hear from everybody. So this first one's for Olivia. Olivia, the people you represent tend to come from communities where members often do not have access to reliable, high-speed internet service. Can you discuss the challenges of effectively representing underconnected clients and how your clients might be disadvantaged by being on the wrong side of the digital divide?
Sure, thank you so much. So I think there are many ways in which my clients are disadvantaged by lack of access to technology, phones, internet. I think a big one that is always in place is my client's ability to speak with their lawyer. Obviously, we can't have every single client coming to the office every single day. So we make use of email, text message, and phone calls. And clients who do not have phones, who do not have internet, we simply cannot speak to them. We can't give them updates on their cases. We can't ensure that they know their next court date, and we can't have important conversations with them about next steps in their case, strategy, etc. There are also issues for clients that have particularly arisen during this new COVID era. During the pandemic, the County of Alameda and many counties have shifted court appearances to be predominantly online, and clients need to be able to attend their court appearances. And when those court appearances are remote, a client who does not have access to the internet cannot attend their court appearance. Fortunately, in Alameda County, the courts are reopening. We've started the process of reopening, so clients are physically able to appear, but still there have been new precedents set for people to appear remotely, and judges requiring people to appear remotely, and they cannot comply with those judicial orders. A third issue that arises is that particularly, I see this a lot, I represent clients charged with misdemeanors, which tend to be less serious offenses where the maximum penalty for any given offense is a year or less. Often clients are given the opportunity to engage in services, classes, as a least restrictive means, either to remain out of custody during the pendency of their case, or as a punishment after they have been convicted. And many of these programs, especially the more affordable or free options, are online. And these can be domestic violence classes, anger management classes, even programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. Many of those have switched to being online during the pandemic, and clients who do not have access to the internet, they can't participate in these programs. So they cannot connect with the services that actually might help them and might cut back on the revolving door of our criminal justice system. So people ending up back in custody or with new cases. And also they're unable to get the benefit of a least restrictive or lesser punishment, not a punishment other than jail time. And they're not able to comply with the judicial orders because they can't get online to go to one of these programs. So our clients are really harmed in numerous ways, given their lack of access to technology, and then also their lack of digital literacy as well. Even clients who do have access to technology, often they don't know how to use it. They don't know how to get into their own email account. Their email accounts are constantly changing because they've lost the password. They don't know how to do things that many of us consider to be very basic. Or how to download the certificate once they've completed a program. Again, things that many of us in this world think this is just basic, but it is actually digital literacy that we are very privileged to have, and many of my clients do not have. So I think this is an amazing project and incredibly important for people in the criminal justice system to have better access to justice. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Olivia. So next we'll go to Peter. Peter, can you briefly tell us first a bit about SDA's work and its constituents, and then if you could share what your experiences with your constituents during the pandemic revealed about the advantages and disadvantages of remote civic participation?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shalev. Well, for starters, SDA, Senior and Disability Action, we're a membership-based grassroots community organizing nonprofit, as mentioned earlier, and we're made up of seniors and people with disabilities of all ages who are mostly in the San Francisco Bay Area. Traditionally, our organizing is focused on housing, healthcare, and transit issues. And yeah, as we're thinking about like what the pandemic has revealed, as shelter-in-place orders came down like 2 years ago, it's hard to say, but 2 years ago, we, like everyone else, had to find ways to shift online and shift our program to virtual spaces as much as possible. And I think unsurprisingly, what we found initially was that almost everyone had a lot of difficulty making the shift. And you can attribute that to the obvious factors. There's lack of internet connection or a quality, affordable connection, lack of the technology or tech that is specifically accessible to various disabilities, lack of comfort or familiarity using that tech if you have it. Like Olivia mentioned, accessing your own email is not a skill that everyone is comfortable with. And all that combined with the stress and the uncertainty that was particularly present in those early months of the pandemic. But as we settled into a Zoom world, like it kind of became clear that there were two things happening. We continue to this day to have members for whom this tech world is really daunting, is inaccessible for a whole host of different reasons, which I mentioned. And that means that, as I think others have and will highlight, many services became harder to access. And the increased social isolation for many has been really terrible, with significant harm to mental health. At the same time, though, I think it's important to highlight that we started to see a different group of folks who have found this remote world more accessible and are now showing up to our meetings more often, making public comment more often at government meetings, who had not been before, or at least not consistently. Some of those folks are folks who work during the day. Some are people who had difficulty accessing transportation to get to City Hall to give in-person public comment, or the other related government buildings. Maybe some had chronic fatigue or chemical sensitivities. Some are ill, can't risk showing up in public. whole host of reasons that committing hours in travel time and waiting to go to an in-person meeting was challenging, but remote became more possible or allowed more access in certain ways. So I think for us, the big takeaway has been with regard to remote civic participation specifically. We've been focused on making clear that doing both safely is the best option. And we're concerned to see some jurisdictions cutting back or doing away with the option of remote participation, because it has been a clear aid to civic participation for many of our members. And that's really not to downplay the necessity of the digital literacy work to make sure that that is actually accessible for other folks, but to say that preserving the option and doing the digital literacy work and making sure that there are safe in-person options for when that digital literacy work and remote options, that combination doesn't come to fruition well enough, that's the best outcome for us in our mind.
Thanks for that answer, Peter. And yeah, one of the things that we really found from the report was just how important optionality is. So I'm glad you brought that up. Javier, the next question is for you. The Canal neighborhood is a historically unconnected part of Marin County. Can you tell us briefly about the Mesh Network project, how the county worked together with a nonprofit to bring real change, and your role in that, your essential role in that, and a little bit about what exactly that change was since the Mesh Network went online?
Yes, thank you, Ross. Again, Javier Trujillo, County of Marin. My involvement began with students when we had the school district, our local school district, the library, the Canal Alliance, including Marin Promise Partnership, some other nonprofits, CBOs in our area, trying to provide for online learning. And in that discussion, we quickly pivoted to an overall community strategy. Although students provided a great entry point for our conversation, with the school and libraries providing hotspots, those little cellular hotspots, they also had a lot of devices sent into the homes with students, and we thought that would be a great leverage point to get going, but it just wasn't working. There was a number of things that were just troublesome with those hotspots. We don't have great data service in the area. The hotspots are troublesome in themselves. They have to be updated. They don't charge. They need to be charged. They have a limit of bandwidth and number of devices that can access them. So anyway, we found that it's like, what if we just built an infrastructure in place? And fortunately for us, the Canal Alliance, which is our most significant trusted community organization in the Canal neighborhood, brought us together. The city of San Rafael, the school district, the county library, and myself to lead the project. And we just envisioned, and you have to keep in mind, this was early days of the pandemic where there was news reports of students in parking lots at Taco Bell. You all remember that news report. And, could we build a resort style Wi-Fi network that would immediately allow us to put in commercial grade internet service without having to worry about the challenges of getting into buildings, to just quickly intervene in this moment? And that's what developed. That was the seed of the idea. Working together, we were able to raise a number of plenty of funds. We've got some private partnerships that allowed us to get access to electricians and bucket trucks and implementators to put in the network, and we managed and leveraged it. It's been really good as a community organizer. We've had a lot of outreach to the community. We've had a lot of collaboration. Ultimately, it was a short-term intervention, though. I'm heartened and at the same time also understandably disappointed that I'm heartened that everybody here recognizes how challenging the email address alone is for many of our users. Accessing government services of any kind, whether it be in the justice space or rental assistance, usually starts with an email address. Accessing it, having it exclusive use, being able to log in and log out, get notifications through that, authentication methods, that is such a major barrier to entry for so many of these services. And it really speaks to that literacy element that this report did such a great job at speaking to. Although I do get frustrated with the term literacy, as I think it's more of a Venn diagram. We all have our version of that definition where there's a lot of overlap, but it captures so much, including the email address. I think the other thing that we have run into with the success and failure of the mesh network is the access is just that first layer barrier to getting in, and then there's so many other additional problems. Even if you have an email address, even if you have a cell phone that can connect to the Wi-Fi and have adequate data to get there, so much of our services are designed from a provider focus. And so in thinking about this panel discussion, I was reminded of the billboard you see on these highways out here, and it has that collapsed house, and it says, "This is the wrong time to check your insurance coverage." This problem reminds me of that, because we ramp up, we intervene to provide services for folks in times of need, but the groundwork and the infrastructure necessary, and I mean infrastructure more figuratively, everything from people and process and communications, needs to be in place so that when these things hit, we can be successful in helping people access. I'm also heartened to hear from the report and from Olivia specifically, who talked about it can make things harder to go online, even though it makes things a lot easier in some ways. It's really been a challenge in that space. But I think the greatest result that came from the Canal Wi-Fi network, we used it for testing access and mass vaccination events. There was a number of ways we leveraged it positively. Rental assistance that was used in that space. Is it really brought us together as a local group, a consortium of cities, towns, and nonprofits in the county to be able to move quickly. We have that infrastructure in place now. So I would call that a real success, and the one that's lasting that's coming from it. I think the mesh network itself works in this environment in a very small way for a very directed purpose. But even just going down the street to South Marin City, it's a very different geography. It's a different community. There was different community-based organizations we have to work through for trust. You go out into the West Marin and up the North Coast, and we have different communities there that have all different challenges. And so even though we have a playbook that we're trying to replicate, every intervention is different and unique. And frankly, it is really short term. We're really trying to build in the Digital Marin, where I sit on the board. We're trying to build a long-term program that will build that infrastructure from data sharing to access to affordability and literacy to bring all that together. So we next time something like this happens, and in the normal daily activities of our lives operating these justice functions, we will at least have make a difference, a positive difference. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Javier. So you mentioned that the term digital literacy is vague, ambiguous, a bit hard to define, which is actually a good segue to our next question, where we'd like to unpack that concept a bit, which, as we discovered in researching the report, is often an overlooked issue related to the digital divide. Even though the conversation tends to focus on issues about access, broadband access, and affordability, each of you, when we talk to you, and even if, as you hinted at in your previous responses, noted that that lack of digital literacy is often the greatest hurdle for your clients or constituents to use services and access the internet. So I'd like to invite each of you, and we'll go in the same order before, just to unpack a little bit more, maybe share some stories in more detail about how lack of wherewithal with digital technologies can drive inequality. And if you could also just keep your answers to 3 to 4 minutes for this round. Thank you.
Sure. So I have actually a very concrete example of something that came up for me in my work last week. I have a young man who has never had any justice involvement in the past. And he had a fight with his roommate, and he was in a group home setting, and he was offered a deal to stay out of trouble for 6 months, complete 12 anger management classes, and the case would be dismissed. He has stayed out of trouble for 6 months, and he has completed his 12 anger management classes. However, he doesn't know how to get back into the program to get the certificate of the 12 anger management classes. He notified me in October that he had completed them and did not send me the certificate at that point. And then he has now had his court date, and the district attorney will not and says they cannot dismiss the case without the certificate. So this young man is now in a situation where his lack of digital literacy, again, something that I think many of us here would think this is very simple. You log back in, you get the certificate, you download it, you take a screenshot, you do what you can. But he, for whatever reason, is unable to do it. And there's just no way for him to figure out how to get back into that platform and to get it. And so because of that, he risks potentially having a conviction on his record for failing to complete this class. And it is solely because of his lack of digital literacy. And that is just one example of many. I have clients who live far away who could fill out plea paperwork online, but they can't figure out how to use Adobe Sign. And so they end up having to drive 2 hours to my office or take numerous buses to my office because it's easier for them to do that than to just sign the paperwork online. And I think if there was a way for us to improve digital literacy, it would just make things so much easier for these folks, and enable people to access some of the programs that have arisen that could really help people during the pandemic period.
Great. Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, thanks for the chance to talk about this a little bit further. And thanks to Olivia for sharing such a concrete example of the way this is showing up. I think for us, the takeaway is that it really compounds existing inequalities. When we're shifting more and more information and services online, folks are being left behind. You can get people the devices, but if they're not actually comfortable using them, then they're not actually truly empowered by this newfound connection. And I think this also goes into online safety and avoiding scams, viruses as well. If we're not supporting people to adequately equip themselves with the necessary tools to navigate the digital world and to do it safely, then we're just sending folks out into the digital wilderness, so to speak. I think for us, that showed up in supporting folks with benefit applications, seeing more people being targeted by different scams that they're not used to being targeted by, right? Like people are used to those phone scams and just don't accept new incoming calls, right? But when things pop up on your windows, on your applications, it's scary, right? And I think for us as a community organizing group, one of the ways in which like a lack of comfort or familiarity with digital technology has really showed up is in our organizing spaces, especially early on. This is lessened a little bit through chipping away, but especially early on, some of our most active members are campaign leaders who are strategizing and building campaigns and pushing forward the work, weren't able to participate, right? Maybe could call in, but I think we all know that the experience of calling into a Zoom meeting is vastly different from the experience of participating in a Zoom meeting face to face. And yeah, we saw a big drop off initially, and we've had to do a lot of work to support folks in getting connected to, either us doing one-on-one support or organizations that do more focused work on digital literacy. Right, it's not exactly our wheelhouse all the time. Just what I hear from so many of our members, especially our older members, is that it's different to grow up with these technologies, and like that's an underrated piece of this. Many folks have learned the skills for digital connection, those essential skills, but they still don't feel fluent. They doubt themselves all the time. Something goes wrong and they're like, I don't want to touch anything else. I could make it worse. There's another group of people that have been just trying for months and they still haven't cracked the basics. and some others who have opted out entirely. And that's not to diminish those folks who have figured it out and are excelling in the Zoom world, right? Love them. But for many, that's not the case.
Thank you for those insights. Let's go to Javier.
Yeah, thank you, Shalev. So it's interesting to listen to my fellow panelists who are great comments. I constantly look at a way to label this differently because digital literacy does feel like a deficit mindset, right? When we're applying, oh, they're illiterate is the implication, right? And that's frustrating to hear and use that language. Really, most of my interventions that I've been a part of have been very technical and not adaptive. And that's generally the first things that we can jump into because it's controllable and it's approachable. But I would kind of harken back to what Peter just said. I can't tell you how many teachers struggled during the pandemic, how many lawyers and judges struggled during the pandemic to operate these tools. And even me, who I consider myself a very competent technical person who's rose with the ranks professionally in technology, I had to learn how to navigate Zoom and Teams and go to meeting or whatever place I went to for the particular event. And what I'd like to plant the seed for is this is really just an extension of navigational capital, is how I'm starting to see it. And we all see that. What it takes to navigate government processes, court systems, getting your certificate from your anger management course is really navigational capital through another narrow pipe, and that's in this case technology. And that's where I find most of my efforts starting with the technical and quickly moving towards how can we center on the adaptive, the navigation side of things, so that we can really make an impact on those folks that are struggling to use the technology, which I think it's worthwhile saying all of us struggle with. I mean, you add two-factor authentication to something and validate your email address and just to get started. And it's very difficult. So we have this balance, and we've also seen our digital accessibility program has thrived during this time because so many of different things that have been very hard for some of our folks with accessibility has been enabled. And we've been pressured to look at a lot of our tools and say, did we build that right? And many of them we didn't, but we were able to address that in kind of a technical approach, which is in our wheelhouse. So in one sense, man, we've had some folks that have really thrived with the new tools that have been made available to them. I can't agree more with Olivia on just the travel time to meet and converse and talk to folks. Removing that navigation, but it's just this constant balance back and forth of it is both a true benefit and at the same time it creates another class of barriers that we have to build systems to support. So.
Thank you all for really, really insightful answers. We have a couple minutes left, and I want to ask everybody, again, we'll just go in the same order, and just please, we got about 5 minutes left. I'm wondering your thoughts, and another theme that's emerged in our interviews is that many of the people who are most in need of broadband or more broadly internet access are unaware of programs that exist to help get them connected, programs such as Lifeline. Do you think there's a role that legal or community service providers can play in promoting awareness of broadband affordability programs, or to otherwise help people get and stay connected? And it'll be I'm looking forward to hearing both from Olivia and Peter from the client side, and then from Javier, somebody who works with community organizers, who works with people on the ground to help put in place programs. So really eager to hear your thoughts on this.
I absolutely think that there's a role that we can play. I am frankly ignorant about ways that my clients can access broadband beyond telling a client, well, can you go to the library? Asking clients, can you go to a FedEx store and have them print something out for you? I know that people have what they refer to as Obama phones, but I think that if I and my colleagues were educated about how people could do this, get better access, I think we would certainly be trying to guide our clients towards that. Particularly in Alameda County, we try to provide holistic representation, which means not only focusing on the legal case, but also on other collateral matters that may be affected by our clients having a legal case, or maybe a cause for them being just as involved in the first place. And we have advocates and we have social workers. And I think that certainly that's something that our advocates could help clients do, is engage with literacy programs, get access to technology. I will say, though, that one thing that many of my clients face, given that they're houseless, is that many of my clients, even when they do get phones or what they call Obama phones, they lose them, they're stolen, et cetera. So there is that complicating factor, which is, how can we connect people with the technology to use internet, broadband, and make sure that they're able to hold on to that technology as well, given all of the complicating factors, at least in many of my clients' lives. But it is certainly something that my office would love to help people with, and I know that many in our field would feel the same way.
Thanks, Olivia. Sorry, yeah, Peter, please go ahead.
Cool. Well, yeah, I think like Olivia said, I think the short answer is definitely. I think often you need trusted contacts to help, and the more of those that we can find wherever we can find them, the better. That seems to be like the single biggest differentiator for someone getting like all the way through to having the tech access they need and want, and the comfort to use it. And, if we're thinking about offering support to enroll in programs, facilitating connections to other organizations, it definitely helps to have that in conjunction with other services, other sports, other programs that people are participating in. It is hard, though, also because I think legal organizations, community groups, local government are all responsible for lots of other work and have competing priorities for time that preclude them from doing, that hands-on support or the referrals or, making that connection, thinking about it. So, I think what I've seen has been best when we've been strapped, right? Organizing during a pandemic, trying to learn about these programs at the same time and wanting to continue to play that role is to act as a bridge. And, for organizations that this is possible for, funders, funding for organizations that are focused on this work of supporting people to navigate the digital world, whether that's getting them the technology or supporting them with training and like the ongoing support that requires. That is, to me, the most effective thing that I've seen. And I know that our panelists sort of focus on slightly different topics and elevating parts of this conversation that get a little less airtime. But I still think it's incredibly important to highlight the other piece, which is that, depending on where you live, you have different potential for access. Just at a fundamental level, your potential to access broadband can vary greatly, even just within city neighborhoods. And I think that that's like a really key piece of this that we need to talk about too. So.
Thanks, Peter. And yeah, that's a really important point. And I would recommend everybody read the report because we do discuss that, and it is an issue of absolute, fundamental importance. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Javier, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just try to wrap up quickly and say one of the terms we use in technology world is the shotgun approach. And whenever you're dealing with complex situations, and we have human behavior and individual agency versus institutions versus all these market forces that are pushing, and this is the definition of complexity, right? And the best way to approach that is multiple in parallel safe to fail interventions. And then you amplify what works and dampen what doesn't. So as many of us in all these different verticals and industries that we are in can try to get this information out, try to provide supports, work with your CBOs that are in your area, which is so key. It's amazing how much CBOs make our world a better place because of the trust factor that they have and because they're so dedicated, a burning fire they have for their work. And get these words out. Comcast recently announced some changes in a combination with the Affordable Connectivity Program. People can get a cell phone and broadband right now for no cost. But man, it's a challenge to get through. But I also believe that it's doable. One example that we can always look at as a model of navigational challenge that has been largely successful is the free and reduced lunch program at schools. That's not easy to get through. You have to renew it every year. We have a bunch of people that fall off every year, but yet at the same token, we still capture a very large portion of our population that's eligible in that space. And so that's a good news story that I think it's possible, but yeah, shotgun approach. We should all be trying, we should all be communicating. Different channels will have different levels of success, different language from different environments will have different levels of success, but together, we kind of inch forward.
Thanks, Javier. That's a good apt analogy, inching forward. We're just all hoping we can inch forward as many inches as we can at a time. But we are at time, and so I just want to thank the panelists so much for taking time out of their busy schedules to be with us today. Thank you to the audience for taking time out of your busy schedules, and thank you, NCC, for the wonderful work you do and for hosting us. Again, thanks everybody for being here. To learn more about these issues, please check out the report, which is linked to several times in the chat. You can also, if you lose the chat, find it on NCC's website. The report is called Cut Off from the Courthouse, How the Digital Divide Impacts Access to Justice and Civic Engagement. And again, thank you.